There are some stories in Doctor Who history that fans consistently regard as some of the worst in a given era, and unfortunately for Peter Davison's Fifth Doctor, Time Flight often sits near the top of those lists. Ranked dead last at 195 in the Doctor Who magazine's mighty 200 poll for Davison's tenure, I can't help but yield to the consensus. This serial, which aired as the season finale of Davison's first year in 1982, is a mess of cheap effects, a dull plot, and a performance from Anthony Ainley as the Master that feels more like a parody than a proper villain. But let's break it down. Welcome to the Snake Pit, where we're full of bile and venom. I'm your host, Snake Demon, and today we're talking about Time Flight, a story that is notorious for all the wrong reasons. I'm usually willing to defend some of Doctor Who's less loved stories, but when it comes to Time Flight, even I have to admit defeat. The story begins with the Doctor, Nyssa, and Tegan reeling from the tragic events of the preceding story, Earthshock, where they lost Adric in a Cybermen attack. Grief-stricken but determined to move forward, the TARDIS crew lands at Heathrow Airport, where Tegan used to work. However, they soon find themselves embroiled in the mystery of a Concorde that has vanished mid-flight. The Doctor volunteers to help, and with another Concorde at their disposal, they set off to follow the trail of the missing plane. They end up being transported millions of years into the past, arriving on a prehistoric Earth. Here they find that the missing Concorde has crash-landed, and its crew and passengers are under the mental control of an ancient, powerful being known as Khalid, who has sinister plans of his own. The Doctor and his companions must uncover the truth, but as they delve deeper into Khalid's control over the area, they soon discover that Khalid is none other than the Doctor's archenemy, the Master, once again scheming for power. With the Master's real intentions revealed, the Doctor must thwart his latest plot and bring the passengers and crew back to the 20th century. However, this being Time Flight, things are never quite as straightforward as they seem. It's hard to know where to begin when critiquing Time Flight because it fails on so many levels. Let's start with the most obvious issue, the special effects. Even for 1980s Doctor Who, the effects in Time Flight are abysmal. The prehistoric Earth set looks laughably bad, with cheap studio-bound rocks and a backdrop that couldn't be more artificial. The equipment that the Master controls is equally underwhelming, resembling something a child might slap together with cardboard and some paint. Worse still, Khalid's initial appearance is one of the most laughably awful prosthetics in Doctor Who history. It's almost impossible to take any of it seriously, which severely undermines the story's attempts at drama. Then we have the plot, which is both bland and nonsensical. A hijacked Concorde that gets transported to prehistoric Earth. It sounds like an intriguing premise, but the story goes nowhere with it. The passengers and crew, despite being integral to the plot, are utterly forgettable. Instead of using this interesting setup for tension or exploration of the time travel angle, the story devolves into one long, convoluted chase scene with little payoff. You never feel like there's any real danger or urgency. One of the more frustrating aspects of Time Flight is the Master's role. Anthony Ainley, who plays the character, is clearly trying to capture the manipulative charm and menace of the original Master, played by Roger Delgado. But Ainley's performance here feels cartoonish, more of a pantomime villain than a genuine threat. The over-the-top makeup as Khalid doesn't help matters either. Ainley hams it up to an almost unbearable degree, missing the subtler menace that Delgado brought to the role. At times, it feels like Ainley is trying way too hard to embody what made the Master great, but without the balance that made Delgado's performance so iconic. Ainley's Master often comes off as more of a bad-tempered prankster than a calculating, malevolent force. The real tragedy is that Time Flight comes immediately after Earthshock, one of the Fifth Doctor's most gripping and impactful stories. The contrast between the emotional weight of Adric's death and the lightweight, almost silly nature of Time Flight is staggering. You'd expect the aftermath of such a loss to be explored more deeply, but Time Flight pushes it aside quickly, replacing character development with an uninspired and clumsy narrative. One of the few redeeming aspects of Time Flight is the performance of Peter Davison as the Doctor. Despite the mess around him, Davison does his best to inject some life into the proceedings. His portrayal of the Doctor, thoughtful, compassionate, and a bit exasperated, helps to soften the blow of an otherwise forgettable story. Sarah Sutton as Nisa and Janet Fielding as Tegan also manage to keep things afloat, but even their efforts are drowned out by the ridiculousness of what they're up against. It's no surprise that Time Flight ranks as one of the worst stories of the Davison era, if not of all time, in Doctor Who. With terrible special effects, a dull and meandering plot, and a wildly uneven performance from Anthony Ainley as the Master, it's a story that fails on nearly every level. Even Peter Davison's solid performance as the Doctor can't save this one from crashing. If you're a completionist, you might still give it a watch, but for most fans, including me, Time Flight is one journey that's best avoided. I'm Snake Demon, and this has been The Snake Pit. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell, like the video, and leave your opinions in the comments, where I won't read them.